Hey everyone, welcome to part 3 of our Power Query series, Data Shaping Techniques. In this session, we'll explore few advanced and essential tools to clean and reshape your data. From grouping and pivoting to transposing, replacing values and filling missing data, these tools help you take raw, imperfect dataset and mold them into structured format perfect for analysis. So if you're interested, keep watching. Now, before we start, the first thing is obviously to import the data in. As we did for previous modules, I'm going to try a new dataset import method. We're going to use a Power BI dataset as a data for this process. Now, what I mean by Power BI dataset is that when you publish a Power BI report onto Power BI services, it automatically creates two layers for the report. One is obviously the visual of the report, the front end layer, and then there is also a semantic model layer which contains all the data set in. Power BI gives us an option to use that semantic model as your data source as well. Now let me give you a quick example. So I'm going to open app.powerbi.com. So when you open Power BI services or app.powerbi.com, this is something that you usually see in your home page. Now within this, you will see a lot of tabs on the left side here. I will go to the workspaces and I'll choose this workspace which I created earlier, which is called tutorial. And within this, you'll see many reports which I have already published onto services. But one thing to note here is every report that you see here is connected to a semantic model. And when you publish a report, this is what you actually publish onto the services, a report layer and also the semantic model. And before this, you will obviously see the data source which is fetching data for that particular semantic model. So in this case, all of these are fetching information from my local instance of SQL Server. Now, in order to publish your data set onto Power BI services, there are two main ways. First one is you open a Power BI desktop, you import the data into the Power BI desktop, hit the publish button, and before you hit the publish button, you would obviously need to log in into Power BI. So I've already logged in with my Microsoft account, and then once I load in the data, I can hit on publish, select the workspace where I want to publish, and then publish. That will show you the dataset on your workspace within Power BI services. The second way is to use something called as a Dataflow. Dataflow is a pipeline which you can use to fetch information or data from any of your data sources and load it directly onto Power BI services without ever going into Power BI desktop. Now, if you want to see how a data flow is created, I've created a detailed video on how to do it. The link will be in the description. You can just check it out. To keep things simple for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the first method, which is I'm going to use a data set, import it into this Power BI desktop, load it back to the Power BI services. So the dataset that we are using today is a simple dataset because we are covering some advanced topics. I wanted to keep the dataset simple so that you understand the concepts easily. So I'll just show you the dataset here. I have a CSV file here, and in this you have sales of different types of coffee for a particular company. Okay, so we're going to use this dataset into our Power BI desktop first. So I'm going to say get data, click on text CSV, choose your source. That will load up the data into Power BI. And before you click on load, I want to just click on transform first. So transform. Now here in the transform tab, I want to show you quick two things which you should know while transforming a dataset. And for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these two steps which Power BI automatically added, which is change type and promote headers. Okay. Now, sometimes what happens is when you load up the data, it will show you the data like this, which means the header row is not considered as a header. Automatically, Power BI assigns a default header name to each of the columns, which is obviously wrong. In order for you to consider your first row as a header, there's an option within transform, within this small button here. You click here, you will see the second option which says use first row as header. If you click that, that will promote your first row as a header, and now that default column name which Power BI assigned has been removed. The second thing is obviously the data type. The sales column is fine. It says 123, which means it's a number. We are okay with that. Category, coffee name, coffee code, day, month, all are fine, but this date is also saying ABC, which is wrong. We would like to convert this into a date. So when you click on this ABC here, it will show you the option. If you select date, and we're going to say replace current, if you notice, the top ones are converted perfectly, but the bottom ones are giving an error. If you click on the error, it will show you that we could not pass the input provided as a date value. And the value is 1/13/2024. Now in this particular case, I know exactly why this is coming up. That is because in my local system setting, the date format is set as DDMMYY. However, in the data set, the value which was inputted is in a MMDDYY format, which is in English US. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to remove this step here, and I'm also going to remove this change type. Now there's a quick way to change your data type setting to your local system setting. That is by clicking on this ABC again, and within this click on using locale. You select the data type here, which is date, and instead of using English your location, choose English US. Now once you choose that, it will show you a sample input values. You press on OK, and now there are no errors coming up on this date column. Now because we removed that change type, we need to add one more data type change, which is on this sales column. It now says ABC. I'm going to click here and click on 123. That will change it to a whole number. You can change this coffee code as well. And now all of the columns are formatted properly in terms of data type. I'm going to click on close and apply. Once the data is loaded, and once you ensure that you're logged into Power BI, just click on publish, save the file. Let's save it as coffee sales data. And for publishing, I'm going to choose this tutorial workspace. Obviously, in your case, you might have a different workspace name. Choose that and press and select. And this will be published onto the Power BI services. Now remember, in order for you to do this, you need to have a pro or a premium Power BI license. You would not be able to do this on a free license. Okay. So now once you published, and if you go back to the Power BI services, you will see that the new data that we publish is here now, and it also published a report layer, but this report layer is empty. So if I open this report here, this does not contain any visuals. Now we can close this Power BI desktop file, and we have opened up a blank Power BI file again. Now remember, the only reason we created that earlier Power BI file was to just upload our data onto the services. In case you don't want to do it like this, you can create a data flow, and that way you would not have to come to Power BI desktop to publish your data. Every time when you create a data flow, you can just directly connect your data source onto the data flow and apply a auto refresh, so that at every given interval, the data gets updated from your source file. Now, I'm going to click on this get data, and if you see, there's an option called Power BI semantic model. I'm going to click on this. Now, since you have published your data onto the workspace, you will see that new data here. So I'm going to click on coffee sales data and connect. Okay, so now the first transformation technique that we're going to learn is called grouping. Grouping can be used in Power Query for summarizing and organizing your large dataset. But when you look at this Power BI file, you will observe that there are few things missing in this file. For example, if you look at the left bar here, usually in Power BI you have 4 tabs, but here we only have report view, model view, and DAX query view. You're missing the tabular view. And if you click on this transform data and try to go to Power Query by clicking on this transform data again, it will give you a small prompt which says a direct query connection is required. The meaning of this is because our data source is located inside Power BI services, we cannot transform your data from your local file, which is just a connection. The actual semantic model exists on the cloud. So you would not be able to make changes using an external file. Now there are 2 ways to do it. First one, you go to Power BI services and make few very basic changes, but that is very limited. The second option is that when you're uploading your data onto Power BI services, you perform all your transformations. Or else, when you're creating a data flow, at that stage, it also gives us many options to transform your data. So for now, what we're going to do is we're going to open the earlier Power BI file, which was the coffee sales data, so that we can perform our transformations there and upload it back to Power BI services. So I'm going to close this file and open up that other Power BI file. Okay, perfect. So now I have this original file where we loaded this data. And now in this, if you see, we have all those 4 tabs. And if I click on transform data here, this will take you to the Power Query editor. And it also contains all the steps that we applied initially. Now let's see how we can apply grouping onto this data. Now what I'm going to do is I'm not going to touch the original data here because I might need this. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here in the query section here and right click on the original table, which is coffee sales. And I'm going to click on duplicate. What this will do is this will create a duplicate of your original data set with all the steps already applied. But there's a catch here. When you create a duplicate, it consumes more resources because you're essentially storing the same data again in your Power Query editor. So usually what I do is instead of doing a duplicate, so I'm going to delete this and go to the original data once more, right click, and instead of a duplicate, I usually use this reference. Now what reference does it uses that original data set as a reference point. So whatever transformations you have to apply on this original data set, the steps will automatically get applied on this one. But then in addition to that, you can add some other transformations. And since this is just a reference, it does not consume that much resources. So I'm going to rename this. All right. Now, once you're renamed, what I want to do is I want to create a summary of this entire data set based on the months that are available. So I want the months column, and then I want to see the total sales count for that particular month. I'm going to click on this month, go to transform, and within this, you'll find this button which says group by. Click there. And now it's giving you a couple of options. So since we already selected the month column on which we want to group the data, it has already selected that here. If you want to change that, you can just click on this drop down and change the selection. It gives you an option to select a new column name. So this will be total sales count. Operation is instead of count rows, I want to sum, and the column that I want to sum is the sales column. And I can press OK. Now, if you see, this data set has been grouped together and it's showing me month-wise total sales count for all the months which are available. Now let's do something else. So I'm going to go back to the original data set here, right click, reference. I'm going to rename this as grouped 2. This time, again, I'm going to select month, click on group by. Now within this, you have an advanced option as well. So I'm going to click on this radio button, advanced. Now inside advanced, you get an option to add more than one column, which will be used to group your data. So I'm going to use the month column, but along with month, I also want the coffee name column as my second level of grouping. So I'm going to add a grouping and select coffee name. Again, let's say total sales. Operation is sum, but as you see, you can choose from any of these operations: average, median, minimum, maximum, count distinct rows, and all rows as well. For now, I'm going to use the sum, use the sales column again. I can add one more aggregation here. So let's say add aggregation. In this, I'm going to use an average sales. Select the average, again sales column, and that is it. Now press OK. Now what this will do is it will club or group my data on the basis of month and coffee name. So each month would have all the coffee names which are available, and within those coffee names, you'll have the total sales for each of those coffee and also the average sales. Now within this, you also have an option to choose all rows instead of choosing an aggregation. So for example, I'm going to right click, choose a reference, go to group by, and instead of using this count rows, I'm going to say all rows. I'm going to press OK. What this does is it creates a nested table within itself. So now, as you see, it says group rows here. I can choose to expand those columns. So if I click on this small button here, it will give you an option to select whatever columns you need. Let's say coffee code and coffee name within each month, and press OK. It will expand for those two columns. And now you have a table with the month, coffee code, and coffee name within it. This can be used for creating a mapping table or some kind of lookup table if you want. Next, let's dive into pivoting and unpivoting. Now, this is a transformation technique which is used when your data is too wide or too tall. What do I mean by that? So, for example, let's say this data is scattered into multiple rows, and I want to create a data which is scattered across columns. So, for example, this coffee name, I want all the coffee names to be a column header, not a row value. So, cappuccino will be a column header, espresso will be another column header, and within that, it will show me the sales value for each of those coffee names. In order for us to do that, we need to pivot this data, right? This is similar to what we do in Excel, the Excel pivots. So I'm going to select this coffee name, and in Transform tab, you can see this option which says pivot column. Select that. It will ask you the value columns, which will be used alongside the coffee name column to pivot the entire data. So the value column is obviously the sales. There are a few advanced options here as well. You can choose some aggregation values. I'm going to keep this as default and I'm going to press OK. Now, if you see, what it did was it converted that row level data into a column level data. Now, each of those rows which had those coffee names has been converted into these column headers. Now, one thing to notice here is the coffee name was associated with each coffee code. So now this column does not make any sense. So you can either remove this or club this along with your coffee name column and pivot that column instead. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to cancel out this pivot column here. Let's create a new column. In order for us to create a new column, you can click on Add Column. Select these two columns, and then in the Add Column tab, click on Merge Columns. The first option here is a separator. So you have to choose a separator which will actually be used while clubbing these two columns. So for me, I can choose any one of these separators here, or you can choose a custom one. So I'm going to choose a custom and press underscore. You can also give a column name for the new column. So let's say coffee underscore pivot and press OK. Now, if you see, the new column has been created here. Now I can safely remove these columns because these are not required. And now I can follow the same process as earlier. Selected this column, go to transform and pivot. The value column is sales. The aggregation for sales is set at sum, and I'm going to keep it that way and press OK. Now, if you see, the coffee column has been pivoted along with that coffee code. Now let's talk about unpivoting a column. Unpivoting is the exact opposite of what we just did. So if your data is in a wide format and you want to convert that into a tall format, as in into row level data, then you can use an unpivot column. So I'm going to use this same example. So I'm going to select all these columns here, and then I'm going to click on this drop down which says unpivot column within the Transform tab. There are multiple options: unpivot columns, unpivot other columns, or unpivot only selected columns. So in our case, this is what we're going to choose. So we only want to unpivot these columns. So I'm going to click here, and now what it did was it converted those columns into a row level data once again. Now, in a real world scenario, such transformation using pivoting and unpivoting can help normalize the overall dataset for better analysis. Now let's talk about transposing, which means flipping rows into columns and vice versa. Now, why and when will you use this? You might use this when your data is structured with headers in row instead of columns, which is not ideal for analysis. Now let's take a smaller dataset for this because I want you to see what's happening. So I'm going to take this coffee sales grouped, reference this again, and I'm going to rename this to transpose. And within this, I'm not going to choose all the months. Let's choose only a couple of them. So January, February, and March is fine. Okay. So now we have 3 months and corresponding sales count for those months. Now what I'm going to do is, in the Transform tab, there's a button called Transpose. So I'm going to click that. What this will do is it will convert my rows into columns. So earlier, if you remember, these months were inside rows, but now these are in columns. But this data is not accurate because I want the months to be my column headers, not row values. In this, what happened was, because it converted into columns, Power BI automatically assigned a default column headers here. Now, I've already shown you how you can rectify this. There's a small button here, click there, and in the second option, it says use first row as header. So I'm going to use this, and instantly that row item gets converted into header. Now, while doing transpose, it is essential that you check null values, because at times it happens that there are a lot of null values because the original row has inconsistent length. So be very cautious about that. Next, let's talk about replacing values. You've already seen this earlier when we started this series, but I'm going to show this to you again. So I'm going to click on this table again and click on reference. Replace helps you to do is exactly what it says. It helps you replace a certain value with another. So if I click on this column here, and in transform tab, there's an option called replace values. If you open up the drop down, you'll see replace values and replace errors. So if your dataset has some errors in it, then you can use this option to convert that error into something else. But this dataset does not have any error. So I'm going to click on replace values. It's giving you an option, value to find and replace with. So what value do you want to find? So let's say I want to find latte, and then I want to replace it with something else. Let's say mocha. Now there are a few advanced options as well. So if you click on that, it says match entire cell content. So what this will do is it will match your cell entire content, and if it matches with this, then only it will replace. And the second option is replace using special characters. So if I turn this on, it gives you an option to find these special characters and replace the value based on that. So if I select any one of them, let's say line feed, it will add this special character here and it will search that, and then wherever it finds that, it will replace it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this, keep this at basic level here, and click on OK. And what this will do is it will convert all those values where the coffee name was latte to mocha. Remember, replace is case sensitive. So if I click on replace values again, and instead of mocha with a capital M, I write MOCHA with a small letter and replace it with latte back again, press OK, then nothing will happen, because Power Query treats mocha with a capital M and mocha with a small m differently. All right, perfect. Now let's move on. Finally, we're talking about fill up and fill down. Now this option is super useful when working with hierarchical or survey data, which means your dataset contains only the first row of a group and then the below rows are empty. You want the first row value to be filled in below rows. Or let's say you want the value of your last row to be filled upwards. We'll see that with an example. So to show you this, I'm going to use again a reference of this main table, and let's rename this again. And instead of using all these columns, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just select coffee name and sales column, right click and click on remove other columns. What this will do is this will remove all other columns which are not selected. This will leave you with these two columns. I'm doing all these steps just so that I can create a scenario where you require fill up and fill down, which means in your data set, you might not have to do these steps which I'm doing right now. I'm going to just replace the latte values with a null value. So I said null, not a blank. Both are different. So if I leave it blank and press OK, the fill up and fill down will not work. It needs a null value. For example, when you're loading your data in from an Excel file or any data source and the value is null there, it will show something like this in your Power Query. But if you leave it blank, then the fill up and fill down will not work. Please keep this in mind. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on fill button here within the transform tab, and I'm going to click on down, because what I want to do is I want to copy whatever value is there above the null value. So in this case, I want cold brew. In this case, I want cappuccino, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to click on this fill and press on down. And as you see, all the values from the above cell has been copied onto that null value. You can also do this for fill up. So I'm going to remove this step here. We're back at null values. Click on fill, and instead of down, I'm going to click on up. Now what this will do is it will copy whatever value was below that null value into that cell. So I'm going to click on up. So now that null value has been replaced with the value which was below it. For example, here it says iced Americano instead of cold brew. So these were the techniques that I wanted to show you today. I'm going to end this video for now, but stay tuned because we're going to cover custom columns, conditional columns, and many more things in upcoming videos. So please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell icon so that you do not miss any content that I upload. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.